Hello teachers and welcome. My name is Amanda Nedzwicki and today I'm going to be showing you how to use Microsoft Whiteboard inside Microsoft Teams. I'm going to show you today how you can really optimize that use of Whiteboard to make it your #1 tool for effective small group instruction. You're going to see how we can use math manipulatives in Whiteboard, how we can annotate a PDF together, how we can sequence acts of a story or play matching games with letters and sounds. It's all right there in a way that kids don't actually ever have to leave the Microsoft Teams app to collaboratively write on PDFs, manipulate base 10 blocks, whatever you need, it's right there, and I'm going to show you how to access it. The very first time that you get your whiteboard set up for a class, it's easiest to access it from the Microsoft calendar. So you go to the calendar, you click on an already made calendar invite that has attendees. And up at the top here, you'll notice now that we have an option for whiteboard. So click on that option. Then you'll receive the option that says, do you want to present or collaborate? I'm going to choose collaborate because I want to create an activity that my kids can do with me. Now my whiteboard's set up, it's already preset to be collaborative. And if you look at just the whiteboard in Microsoft Teams, it looks like there's not a whole lot you can do. You can color with a pen, you can erase, you can put in a text box, or you can add a sticky note. But the secret is that while the functionality within Teams for the teacher is fairly low, in the app there are so many more options. So I'm going to choose this option up here that says Open in App and open the app. So this takes me to a whiteboard in the Microsoft Whiteboard app that I can use for my class. And if I set it up as a reoccurring meeting, this is the same whiteboard that will show up in every single meeting. One of the most important things to do to keep yourself organized is to go out to your whiteboards and to rename them so you know which one you're working on. To do that, you click on these 3 dots, and in this bottom space that says Whiteboard Meeting, I can title this the way that I want to make it make sense. So now I've got that whiteboard open, and I would go back and I would repeat that process for each class that I want to teach. So I've gone back and done that process several times over. I have my whiteboards for each of my small groups and my morning meetings set up so that I can work from here. So what you're seeing now is my Microsoft Whiteboard app with a whole lot more things in it. Down here, you can see that I have my whiteboards associated with my small groups, just like I talked about. Now it's very important, if you make a mistake or something, there are tools within the whiteboard to clear that canvas. Do not delete the whiteboard that's associated with a small group. I tried it this morning and it gives you an error message, and there's no way to then ever use a whiteboard in that small group again. So there are better ways to solve problems, just don't delete those boards. However, where we're going to start is with creating a new whiteboard. I highly recommend that any new assignment that you want to prepare, you start by doing it in a new whiteboard. That will allow you to have access to this activity after your day's lesson. Because remember, the whiteboard that goes with your team always stays the same, so you're going to have to clear the canvas for new days and you're going to lose all of that work. If you make it in a separate file first, It's just like, downloading a doc and having your doc ready before you send it in Google Classroom. You want the unedited version available for future use. I'm also modeling how to prepare these ahead of time. You can do this live. I tried it live several times. If you have your clipart open, your whiteboard open, you know exactly what you want to do, you can make it work live if you need to. However, you can also have it work prepped, which is a much less stressful scenario to end up in. So the most basic uses of this whiteboard versus the one in Teams is the ability to insert PDFs and images. When you use your whiteboard inside Teams, you don't have that option. But by opening up the whiteboard app, you now suddenly have a lot more options than what you had before. Adding images is really simple and can be done in a couple of different ways. If you have clipart already downloaded on the computer, or you've gone online, you've downloaded the pictures that you want, it's as easy as dragging what you want and putting it on the board. So I can have my units, my tens, my hundreds, and my thousands ready right here. You can scroll in and out to change the size as well. Say you were going to do a lesson where you wanted students building numbers using models. I might then want to have several of these ready up top so that students can just grab them and pull them down to represent the number that I want them to. It's pretty easy, just copy and paste. I like to Control C, Control V. Control C is copy, Control V is paste. And after you do the first time, you can just Control V over and over again. Now we've got a nice set of ones right here that we can use as kids need to pull them down. Again, this takes a little bit of setup time, which is why I would go for the option of creating this in its own whiteboard so that anytime in the future where you might need these base 10 blocks again, you are able to get them. And you can repeat this process as many times as you want. However you want to model this, or however big you want your numbers to be. And so now what kids would do is you would give them the number. You could practice in a bunch of different ways. You could orally say the number and have a student write it down using the drawing tool that they have on their app. You could type a number here that you want them to put together. Resizing the text is as easy as clicking off of it and then dragging to make it larger. Then you could put a student in charge of taking turns to manipulate these blocks to bring them down to represent the number just how you want to. You can always scroll out to see more of your computer screen, or make images smaller so that they fit on the whiteboard better. It's just, now one important piece is if you're working on a team and you want to share this with colleagues, it's actually super simple. You just click this blue button up here, type in the name of the colleague that you'd like to share this with. Mine immediately showed up with all of my teachers at Carver Dual Language, and then they have access to this same board as you do. You can work on it together, or they can just have access to it if they choose to. But now what's important is how to use this in your small group. So now you've set this up, it's all ready for you to go, you need to use it in your small group. I haven't found a way that you can export and import different templates, but there's an easy workaround. The easy workaround is using your keyboard to press Control A, which selects everything on your page, Control C, which copies everything on your page, and then going down, if this was what I wanted to do in my small group math today, Control V, which pastes everything from the other one onto this document. So now it's set up for my first small math group, and then if I'm doing the same thing in my second small group math, I would just do it all over again. And here we go. Now my two classes are set up, able to use base 10 manipulatives inside Teams. They don't have to go to another app to show their thinking or to model their work. The other way to create something is by just importing a PDF that you already have, and then you're able to use it either as a graphic organizer or as a math aid or just as a collaborative worksheet. You can import a PDF by pressing the Insert menu and Insert PDF. I'm looking for a place value kind of graphic organizer that will allow them to compare numbers to 10,000. When you have a PDF that has multiple pages, you're able to choose whether you want to insert all the pages or insert just one of the pages or however many you'd like. You just click on the one that you want to insert and then you press Insert. So this is a nice thing for an organizer for math class as we're learning how to compare bigger numbers. I could also use this in conjunction with my other board that I just created. I could put this on one side of the board and put those base 10 blocks over here in case we needed access to both of them. Or if my students are past the point where most of them aren't needing the concrete base 10 blocks anymore, I can just have this right here. Then I can either say a number and have a student write it, or I can type a number and have it up here. The writing typing also kind of depends on whether you're on like an iPad or something you can write on or not. I'm on an actual computer, so the writing looks kind of sloppy. So I've been preferring to type. But as that first number is written down, you assign a student. You said this student's going to read it out loud. This student's going to write it in the chart while I write another number. I also am loving the idea of color coding them, so that you can say, student 1, you're filling out it with a blue pen your number in the organizer. Student 2, you're filling out with your pen the green number with a green pen in the organizer. And that can, in different contexts, that could help be a little bit of a formative assessment as well. Now, one big benefit of choosing to type the numbers over writing them out is the ability to manipulate and move the numbers after you've compared them. So if I have it typed and this number is right here and this number is right here, after we put them all in the chart, I can have students actually drag these around and put them in order from least to greatest. Again, I could already have several choices of numbers ready on this template before I give it to students. There's a lot of different ways to do that and a lot of different ways to be prepared. But once you have those numbers, you've put them all out in your chart, students have used their pen to write on the chart, then you can have them move the numbers around, decide which one's least, which one's greatest, justify their answers, all of that other stuff with these movable text boxes that everybody has access to. So now I've opened up a meeting. I opened up my whiteboard. I had copied and pasted from my whiteboard into this meetings whiteboard to make sure that everything is right where I need it to be to start my class. So a few notes. One thing is, at this point, once it's set up, it does not matter whether you're working in Whiteboard or whether you're working in Teams. Whatever I move in Whiteboard moves in Teams, and vice versa. It shows up on both screens. So once you have all the pieces that you need, if it's easier for you just to go back to Teams, you can absolutely do that. There's also an option up here that's super important on the settings where it says other participants can edit. We know that as teachers, when we hand out materials, if we are not very explicit, the first thing that happens is they start grabbing things without permission or, playing with things. It's even harder when they're on the other side of the computer screen. So while you're explaining directions or while you're going over etiquette, you can lock your screen so that the students cannot move it and only you can. Then when you're ready for the students to start to edit, you can click this button right here in the settings, and then they'll be able to edit with you. Just like anything else that we do, it's super important to teach all of the rules. You will want to have assignments where you practice picking a certain colored pen, where you practice erasing, practice moving items, practice using the text box, and practice the etiquette of not moving something unless you were told to, not erasing anybody else's work. All of those things, just like any new tool, are going to be absolutely imperative to allow you to use this to its best capacity. I also wanted to show you that you can lock some items from the Microsoft Whiteboard so that even when it's time for students to move things, if you don't want an object to be movable, especially say if you imported a PDF as a background and you don't want kids to be able to move it around, all you have to do is click on the item and click this lock button. And then it locks it to the back and it's no longer movable. I can't show you that here. It locks it to the back and now it's no longer movable. I can't move that individual piece anymore. So that could also be an important tool to use. Finally, remember that the whiteboard that you're using in your reoccurring small group stays the same from every single meeting. So if you want to save something that you did in a meeting, which you might want to for formative assessment data purposes, you might want to because you collaboratively created an anchor chart with your students that you want them to have access to in the future. Or if for any reason you think that what the work that your kids did with you on the whiteboard is important enough to need to pull back up again later at any point, that's actually really easy too. You just click on your settings and you press export. You can also post it straight to Teams so that kids can see what you did. Finally, when you are done with a session or you're ready to move on to the next part of the lesson and you need to copy and paste, something different in here, the easiest way to clear your canvas is to just click Settings and click Clear Canvas. In the final section of this video today, I want to show you some of the tools that I think could be really useful for you as a teacher, as well as some of the example use cases that I could just easily come up with off the top of my head, and show you how to do them fairly easily and quickly. One of the things that you might want to play around with, especially if you're a math teacher or you're practicing some handwriting, are the background options. So by clicking on Settings, you can then click on Format Background, and you have a bunch of different options. Now they're a little bit hard to see. I don't quite get it. When they're white, it's hard to see. But for example, if you zoom in, you can see it a lot better. But if I were teaching area and perimeter, this would be a great place to start. I can draw my shapes right on top. Another one for a math teacher is called this ink to shape. Basically, you try to draw a shape and then it turns it into looking more like the shape that you actually wanted it to look like. So if I get out my pen here and I draw a rectangle because I want my kids to find the area and perimeter of this rectangle, then when I'm done, it formats it into a much nicer rectangle than what I had before. Of course, now I've got to adjust it a little bit so that we can actually do area and perimeter. But now it's on here. I have a shape. We can do area and perimeter right inside Microsoft Teams. There's a few additional math tools up here in the inking mode. You do have a ruler that you can practice with, as well as this little bit telling you what degree the ruler is at right at this moment. So when you have the ruler up, it can help you draw straight lines on the diagonal. So if I get my pen out and I want to draw a line up against the ruler, it keeps it straight, which is also very helpful if you're writing on a computer with a mouse. One of the other really cool features of this is that there are some templates that are already pre-set up for you to use, especially in like an upper grade literacy classroom, but there are some use cases across the board. So if you go to this plus, this insert menu down here, and you click on template, you can see some of the templates that they have already. Ones that I thought would work particularly well for education are KWL charts. We definitely already use them. And on this one, in each one, it's set up for you already to double click and type into each of these boxes as you're helping kids work through a KWL chart. Anytime I want to show you something new, I'm just going to clear my canvas. There are a couple other options in here which could be kind of helpful. The retrospective look back and reflect on recent work could also be a really great tool for a team or for a class or for a project reflecting on what happened and how we could improve it. So the last and final thing I want to show you are some ways that I could see as a teacher using this in the classroom. I'm going to start with a couple of primary examples. Also, I do know phonics. I teach in Spanish. I've always taught in Spanish, and my teachers teach in Spanish. So the phonics that you're seeing right here match the words in Spanish. So in this one down below, I had used a worksheet that I'd made a long time ago, and I used my snipping tool on my computer. I just opened up like the cut and paste snipping tool, and I just took a big picture of this top image. This would be a good example of something I might want to lock so that my students cannot move it, because I want them to be able to move the pictures down below, but I do not want them to be able to move the actual document. And so from here we could take turns. We would go through, we would review what each vocabulary word said, and then I would call on a student and I would tell them to move the oso to the initial starting sound. We'd say the word, we'd listen to the sound, and then I'd call on a kid to move it to match the O, and that kid moved it right up. We could go on, árbol, a. So now we just turned an activity that in real life I would have had kids cutting and pasting into something that I can use in my small group that together we're going to sort this out. This could also be great if your kids are later going to do an activity just like this in Seesaw. They can help you do it together during your small group lesson, and then after your small group lesson, they can go do something very similar in Seesaw, which has some of these same capabilities to use kind of a whiteboard and a template and stuff like this. Other phonics cases I've seen, syllable word building would work the same way. If I want to have casa, again, I would lock my background one that I don't want them to be able to move. And then as a class, we can say the word, we can count the syllables, we can touch the word, and then together we can move our syllables, casa. Truly, the easiest way to make something like this is just to use your snipping tool, or however you can take screenshots on your computer, and just isolate each piece that you want, copy and paste it on over. If you have images or clip art, that can also be done fairly easily. Another worksheet I'd made a long time ago, where students are supposed to color the sounds or the words that start with the sound oo. We could teach them in this case how to use the highlighter, and we could go through each word, decide together whether it sounds like it, and then kids would get to take a turn coloring the words that start with oo. We could even use this to practice handwriting. This would be a case where I would want to lock all of my background images because I don't need kids moving any of these pieces. What I want to make collaborative in this lesson is the writing. We all know that teaching handwriting and writing in general to little ones over a video lesson is going to be hard. So this is at least one way that they could get a little bit of practice with forming the letters, even if it's just writing with their fingers. And another way that you can model how to write those letters correctly using your pen on the lines. Again, this could be a great intro to do something together during small groups. Oh, it was my form to shape decided that should be a circle. But this is another way that you could do it during small groups and then send them off to do something similar in Seesaw or even on a work packet if you sent that out with them. Sequencing is another easy way. Last year, one of my teams did a lot of work with reading a text and sequencing the images afterwards. So here you would have the text that you would lock. You'd have your graphic organizer here that you would lock. Once again, this was an already made worksheet that they had done last year, and I just took screenshots and snipped each of these pieces right here, copied and pasted, and threw them right into the document. So we could read together in a guided reading lesson, each kid reading on their own, me listening in, and then at the end they can move the pictures to what happened first. First they went to the parque, subieron al columpio, jugaron fútbol, y comieron galletas. Another thing that we can practice together, they can help, and then they can do on their own later. With clipart images, you could collaboratively retell a story that you've been reading all week. I see this as the digital equivalent of, making stick puppets and retelling stories after you've practiced them. We teach in a language learning environment, so it's very important that kids hear stories over and over again and then can reenact them. So by having these movable clipart pieces, you can have kids taking turns, or each kid could be assigned one of these puppets, quote unquote, to help react out a story that they've been hearing in class. I know that these are a lot of options and some of them may be a little bit overwhelming. I'm just trying to show you the full scope of what we could do here. In this example, this one's from an actual class. We were practicing, I just pulled out some clip art of vowels, and they were practicing writing the letters with their fingers next to the vowels. And then what's cool is as a single letter, afterwards we can mix them all up, and then kids can have to match them back together again as a second practice activity. I've been thinking a lot about how to create a morning message or a morning meeting with how important that early print literacy is, and this is a huge part of an elementary classroom in the morning. So you could either handwrite or type in another document or typewrite in this document your morning message. The benefit to doing it in another document and copying and pasting would be allowing it to lock, because as far as what I've seen, when you just type it in a text box here like I did, I can't lock it. But if I typed it somewhere else and then took a screenshot and inserted it as an image, then I would be able to lock it so kids couldn't move it. And then here, either together or with kids, as you're reading your message, you're filling out your message, you're practicing your days of the week, your months of the year, whatever you're practicing, you're counting the days. You're writing in sight words that they know because you've done this message so many times. You can circle the w sound. Where do you see that happening? Or underlining certain sight words in certain colors. A little bit harder than what we do in person, but still really gets across the idea of turning over that pen to the kids to help you create a message together and pay attention to the phonics and the sight words and all the great things that we can learn inside a morning message. This has been a lot of primary examples. I have 3 more that I want to show you. One, just a quick one. You could use it for non-academic purposes as well. You could use it before or after a lesson to check in on how kids are feeling. They could write their name or handwrite their name underneath the column. You could do this with any kind of choices. And then that led me to think that, wow, this would also be a great tool to use with building graphs. And especially if you use it on the grid side, kids being able to mark their X's, tallying, turning it into a graph, that would also work super well in this program. The last 2 I have are some math examples. This one in particular, formative assessment has been kind of hard. When we're sending them out to other websites, we're not always getting things turned back in, and therefore it's hard to tell in the moment how kids are doing. If you're doing it right here in Microsoft Teams Whiteboard, you can upload a worksheet like this. You can color code things. You can say, kid 2, you're green. Kid 1, you're blue. These are the ones that I want you to go do right now. And in their space, next to the question, they can write out their answer. And you can get some immediate formative assessment feedback on how each individual kid is doing without them having to leave the app and without the risk that they're not going to finish the work that they're doing outside of the app in time for you to get enough data to really plan your next lesson. The use case for Microsoft Whiteboards that I am most excited about is the ability to solve math word problems. As a math specialist, it has been my greatest concern that not all kids have access to the same type of modeling and manipulatives that they might in a real classroom. Now, we can't necessarily replicate everything that we want to, but this Microsoft Teams Whiteboard does allow us to give kids manipulatives to solve problems. It allows us to give them organizers to model their problems, and it allows us to see in real time specific students thinking, because they're essentially sharing their work with us without having to go through the process of going onto another website, using the manipulative, sharing their screen. In a 20-minute or 30-minute small group, you got to be ready to go, and that's what this is. You can write out a word problem, you can have a space for an equation, your space for your answer sentence. You can put in whatever kind of counters you want, whether we're just using abstracts, whether we're using counting berries like we might in the lower grades, or whether you're using manipulatives that are value something like money. You could throw images of coins in there. You can also have your number bond or your bar model ready for kids to label. So it's already pre-drawn and they just need to label the parts. I'm a huge fan of bar modeling. And what's cool is you can even have a mini anchor chart in the corner. You can put in this anchor chart, allow kids to reference it if they forget which kind of a bar model looks like. And with the whiteboard, you can always scroll out and scroll in. So if they need to get a closer look at what they're doing, they can scroll back in, take a look at your anchor chart, scroll back out, and go remember how to draw or label their bar model. So today in this video, I've walked you through some of the very basic ways that we can use Microsoft Teams. You learned how to open up whiteboards for each of your reoccurring small groups that you're hosting in Teams. You learned how to create new whiteboards with activities in them, how to add images or PDFs, how to copy all of those into a small group board that you're wanting to use for your lesson, and how to share those with colleagues so that you can collaborate and share materials and share the workload. I introduced just a few of the tools that are available within the Whiteboard app, including the background changer with a grid, the shape function, the ruler, and the ability to insert templates. Now, that's just scratching the surface. There are a whole lot more options in there, but I wanted to focus directly on what would be most instructionally useful for teachers right away. I really hope that this helped you in your journey on learning how to teach virtually through Microsoft Teams, and I really look forward to seeing all of the unique and creative ways that teachers take this information and implement it in their own classrooms.